Human was forced to marry an alien widow for her kingdom. What happened next was beyond imagination. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Alex Carter had always been just an ordinary man, working as an engineer in a small town, living a life of quiet simplicity. But that was all about to change. The moment the royal emissary arrived at his doorstep, everything he knew was turned upside down. Alex had never expected to find himself in the midst of an intergalactic political struggle, much less be forced into a marriage with a powerful alien widow. It all started when the Tan Dominion, a star empire that spanned 17 systems, found itself in a deep crisis. Queen Lyra, the ruler of the Tan Dominion, had recently lost her husband, the king, under mysterious circumstances. With the kingdom on the brink of collapse and no heirs to take the throne, Lyra faced a heartbreaking decision. To secure the future of her people and her reign, she needed to marry again, but not just any marriage. It had to be someone strong enough to keep the peace and wield the power her people needed. That's where Alex came in. His name had been selected, not because of his wealth, power, or lineage, but because of his reputation as a reliable, strong, and honorable man. An emissary arrived on Earth with a message, one that Alex could not ignore. He was summoned to the Tan Dominion as a savior for their kingdom. Alex had no choice but to accept the proposal, for refusing it would mean not only the destruction of an entire civilization, but also the end of countless lives. So, he packed his bags and boarded the ship that would take him to an unknown future. When he arrived on the distant planet of Tan Prime, the capital of the Dominion, he was greeted by the cold, majestic architecture of the palace and the piercing eyes of Queen Lyra. Her presence was commanding, a mix of regal authority and deep sorrow, and Alex could feel the weight of her grief. But there was no time for small talk or pleasantries. As the emissary explained the terms of the marriage, Alex realized just how complicated and dangerous his new life would be. The queen was a woman of unmatched strength, but the pressure she was under had made her distant and closed off. Alex could sense that she wasn't thrilled by the idea of marrying a man she didn't know, let alone someone from another world. But duty called. He was to be her protector, her partner, and her king, at least in name. The palace felt cold, and every hallway echoed with the emptiness of a kingdom on the brink of collapse. As Alex tried to make sense of his situation, the queen's cold demeanor only grew more apparent. Yet, he couldn't help but notice a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, something beyond the rigid walls of authority she had built around herself. This wasn't just a political alliance, it was a lifeline for her kingdom. And despite his reservations, Alex knew he had a role to play in this grand scheme. But as he settled into his new life, one question lingered in his mind. Could a marriage born out of duty ever turn into something more? Could he truly find love in a relationship forced upon him by fate? Only time would tell. As Alex settled into his new life on Tan Prime, the weight of his decision began to sink in. The palace, with its towering spires and intricate architecture, felt more like a prison than a place of power. Every day was filled with political meetings, royal ceremonies, and constant reminders of the role he was now forced to play. But despite the grandeur of the kingdom, there was an undeniable emptiness that lingered in the halls. Queen Lyra, though a powerful and respected leader, carried herself with a cold distance. Alex could see the burden of leadership in her eyes, but no matter how hard he tried to reach out, she remained aloof. The days blurred together, and the weight of his forced marriage to her felt heavier with each passing moment. But everything changed one evening when Lyra, unexpectedly, opened up to him. It happened during a state dinner in the grand banquet hall of the palace. The room was filled with dignitaries from across the Dominion, all gathered to witness the union of their queen and her new human consort. Alex stood at Lyra's side, the pressure of the occasion weighing on him. He could feel the eyes of the entire room on them, each glance filled with judgment, expectation, and curiosity. But as the evening wore on, Lyra seemed to soften, just for a moment. She leaned in close to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever wonder, Alex, what it would be like to live without this weight?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. Alex looked at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. "Every day," he replied honestly. "I didn't ask for this, but here we are." She nodded, her expression unreadable. "I never wanted to marry again. Not like this. But the kingdom needs stability, and her voice trailed off, and for the first time since their forced union, Alex saw the flicker of sadness in her eyes. It was as if the queen, the woman who had always appeared so composed, had cracked just enough to let the pain show through. He couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. "You don't have to do this alone," Alex said softly, his voice steady. "I'm here to help, whether you want me to be or not." She looked at him, her gaze lingering a moment too long. For a split second, Alex thought she might actually believe his words, but then the moment passed, and she straightened, regaining her composure. "Thank you, Alex. But this is my responsibility. I am the queen." The conversation ended there, but the words lingered in Alex's mind long after. The next few days were filled with more royal duties and more distance between him and Lyra. But something had shifted. Alex could feel it. For the first time, he wasn't just a pawn in the political game. He was a person in her life, even if only briefly. As he walked through the palace corridors, his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden call to Lyra's private chambers. When he arrived, he found her pacing, an expression of deep frustration on her face. "Alex," she said urgently, "there's been a breach in our security. I need you to help me investigate." Alex, always ready for a challenge, nodded and stepped forward. "What happened?" "I don't know yet," she said, her voice tense. "But someone is trying to destabilize our kingdom. I need you to trust me on this." For a brief moment, their eyes locked, and Alex saw a different side of the queen. Not the ruler, but the woman who was desperately trying to protect her people, her legacy. "I trust you," Alex said. It wasn't just a diplomatic answer. It was the truth. And for the first time, it felt like they were truly working together. The investigation was long and filled with danger, but as they uncovered a conspiracy to assassinate the queen, Alex and Lyra found themselves in a situation that no one could have predicted. Lyra's life was on the line, and Alex had to make a choice. He couldn't stand by and let her fall. He wasn't just her husband by title anymore. He was her protector, her ally, her partner in every sense of the word. The days that followed were filled with suspense and danger. The kingdom was in turmoil, and the political landscape had shifted yet again. But amidst the chaos, something else was happening between Alex and Lyra. Slowly, the cold walls between them began to crumble. They weren't just two people bound by duty anymore. They were becoming a team, a force to be reckoned with. As the threat to the queen was neutralized, the connection between them deepened. There were no more pretenses. The forced marriage had become a bond of trust, respect, and, for the first time, a flicker of love. But as Alex and Lyra stood together, watching the sunset over the palace gardens, they both knew that their journey had only just begun. The kingdom may have been saved, but the challenges ahead were even greater. And yet, for the first time, they were ready to face them, together. As the days passed, the bond between Alex and Lyra grew stronger, but their world was far from stable. The threat to the queen's life may have been neutralized, but the political landscape of the Tan Dominion was still fragile, and the tension within the palace was palpable. Queen Lyra, now more comfortable in her role as a ruler, still held a guarded distance from Alex. Yet, each passing day brought them closer. Not just as political partners, but as something more. The responsibilities of their marriage had shifted from mere survival to a deeper understanding of each other. Alex spent countless hours by her side, assisting her with decision-making, navigating the delicate power struggles of the Dominion, and offering his perspective as an outsider. In private moments, they shared their hopes and fears, and with every passing conversation, the walls that had once separated them began to crumble. One evening, as they sat together in Lyra's private quarters, the weight of the past few weeks seemed to settle in the room. Lyra turned to Alex, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something Alex hadn't yet allowed himself to name. "You've proven yourself more than I ever expected," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "You've given me more than just your loyalty, Alex. You've given me your heart." Alex looked at her, a wave of emotion washing over him. He had never imagined he would find himself in this position, let alone feel this way about a woman he had once only known as a queen. "I didn't ask for this, Lyra," Alex replied, his voice steady but filled with raw honesty. "But I can't deny that something changed. And I'm not just here because I have to be. I'm here because I want to be." There was a brief silence as Lyra studied him, her expression unreadable. But then, a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips, and for the first time, Alex saw her vulnerability, the woman behind the crown. "I never thought I'd hear those words from you," she said, her voice warm with a touch of amusement. "But I'm glad you did." Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of a royal messenger, who entered with an urgent message. The kingdom, it seemed, was not at peace just yet. A new rebellion had stirred in the outer territories, and Lyra was needed to address the growing unrest. Alex knew that this would be yet another challenge, but he was ready. He had faced battles before, both in the physical sense and within himself. And now, with Lyra by his side, he was prepared to face whatever came next. As they made their way to the War Council, Alex felt a sense of purpose that he had never experienced before. This was no longer about survival or political games. This was about fighting for something greater than themselves. The rebellion was only a symptom of a larger problem, the fractures within the Dominion's power structure. It was clear that the old ways could not sustain the empire for much longer. As Lyra took her seat at the head of the table, Alex stood by her side, his presence a silent vow of support. The meeting was tense, filled with diplomatic figures and military leaders offering their strategies, but Alex remained focused on Lyra. She had grown into the role of queen with surprising grace, commanding respect not only through her position, but through her actions. As the hours passed, plans were laid, alliances forged, and strategies developed. But through it all, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was not one of politics or warfare. The real challenge was learning to navigate the complex emotions that had developed between him and Lyra. As the meeting came to a close, Lyra stood and turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a newfound understanding. "I know this won't be easy, Alex," she said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of the decisions ahead. "But I'm not alone in this anymore, and I won't let the Dominion fall." Alex nodded, his heart swelling with pride. He had once been an outsider, thrust into a situation beyond his control, but now, he was an integral part of something much larger. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, not as ruler and consort, but as partners in every sense of the word. As the door to the War Council chamber closed behind them, Alex and Lyra stepped into the unknown, ready to fight for the future of the Dominion and, for the first time, for their own future as well. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty, but Alex and Lyra were more united than ever before. They worked tirelessly to address the rebellion that threatened to tear the Dominion apart, carefully navigating the complex political landscape while managing the unrest in the outer territories. As they planned their next moves, Alex found himself growing more attuned to the intricacies of leadership, learning to think not only as a protector but as a partner in the fight for the Dominion's future. They spent long hours in the War Council, debating strategies, making alliances, and preparing for the inevitable clash that loomed ahead. During one such meeting, Alex noticed a subtle shift in Lyra's demeanor. The once distant queen was becoming more open, more willing to share her thoughts and feelings with him. They were no longer just two people bound by duty. They were working together as equals, their relationship deepening with each passing day. The more they spoke, the more Alex understood just how much she had sacrificed for her kingdom. She had always been the strong, unyielding ruler, but beneath the surface, there was a woman who had lost everything and was desperately trying to hold onto the little she had left. It was then that Alex realized the true nature of their bond. It wasn't just about saving a kingdom or fulfilling a political contract. It was about trust, about understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses, and about finding solace in one another despite the odds. Their private moments, though brief, became a refuge from the chaos of their world. Lyra would seek him out after long days of meetings, her shoulders tense with the weight of her responsibilities. In those moments, they would talk, sometimes about strategy, sometimes about their pasts, and sometimes about nothing at all. It was in these moments of quiet connection that Alex began to see Lyra in a new light. She was no longer just the queen who had been forced into an unwanted marriage. She was a woman who had endured countless hardships and still stood tall. As they sat together one evening, watching the twin moons rise over the palace gardens, Lyra turned to Alex, her expression more vulnerable than he had ever seen it. "I never thought I would find someone who truly understood me," she said, her voice soft. "You've shown me a side of myself I thought I had lost." Alex looked at her, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and affection. "Lyra," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I didn't ask for this life, but I can't imagine it without you now. We've been through too much to go back." She smiled at him, a small but genuine smile that spoke volumes. "I never thought I'd say this, but I think I'm starting to feel the same way." The quiet admission hung in the air between them, and, for the first time since their marriage, Alex felt a sense of peace. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were thriving together. As the weeks went by, the rebellion in the outer territories began to lose momentum. Alex and Lyra's efforts were paying off, and the Dominion was slowly returning to a fragile but hopeful state of stability. But even as peace seemed within reach, the challenges ahead were far from over. The political intrigue within the Dominion was ever present, and the pressure on Lyra to maintain her authority was unrelenting. Yet, Alex was by her side, unwavering in his commitment to protect her and their future. One night, as they prepared for another round of talks with the leaders of the outer territories, Lyra took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. "I never imagined that a marriage forced upon us could turn into something like this," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. Alex, ever the pragmatist, smiled. "Neither did I, but sometimes the most unexpected things turn out to be the best." She leaned in closer, her eyes locking with his. "I don't know what the future holds, Alex, but I'm starting to believe we might just make it through this together." And in that moment, Alex knew that no matter what the future brought, they would face it side by side, as partners, as allies, and as something more. Their journey together had only just begun, and though the road ahead would be difficult, they were ready to walk it together, with nothing but their trust and love to guide them. The days that followed were filled with both triumph and uncertainty, as the Dominion slowly but surely regained its footing. Alex and Lyra, now fully united in their mission to secure peace for their people, continued to face both external threats and internal political challenges. The rebellion had finally been quelled, but the aftermath left lingering fractures within the realm, and the task of healing them rested squarely on Lyra's shoulders. Alex, however, never wavered in his commitment. He stood by her side, not just as a husband, but as a partner in the truest sense of the word. As Lyra navigated the delicate political waters, Alex found himself deeply immersed in the complexities of the Tan Dominion. The strategies they had put in place were paying off, and the outer territories began to accept the peace agreements, but the palace itself still simmered with intrigue. Lyra's power, though solidifying, was constantly tested by rival factions within her own court, each seeking to weaken her and claim power for themselves. One evening, as they sat in her chambers discussing their next move, Lyra looked over at Alex, her expression thoughtful. "There are still those who question our union," she said softly, her voice heavy with the weight of her responsibility. "There are whispers in the halls, rumors that my decision to marry you was a sign of weakness." Alex met her gaze, his expression firm. "Let them whisper. We've already proven them wrong. What matters is what we've built together, not what they say behind our backs." Lyra smiled, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "You've always known just what to say to calm my doubts." But Alex could sense the underlying tension in her voice. Despite everything they had overcome, there was still a part of her that feared the power struggles and betrayals that had long been a part of her world. "You've been carrying this weight alone for so long," Alex said gently. "But now you don't have to." Lyra turned her gaze to the window, her eyes distant. "It's hard to let go of the fear that I'm not enough," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "That I'll fail them. Fail this kingdom." Alex reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You've already done more than enough, Lyra. The kingdom is standing because of you, and because we've fought for it together." The sincerity in his words seemed to reach her, and for the first time in a long while, Lyra allowed herself to lean into the comfort of his presence. They were no longer just two people bound by duty. They were a team, united by their shared dreams and the love that had slowly but steadily blossomed between them. As the days went by, their partnership grew stronger. Alex began taking on more responsibilities, not just in military strategy, but in helping Lyra navigate the delicate web of politics. Together, they traveled to the outer territories, meeting with leaders, forging alliances, and reaffirming their commitment to the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. But despite the outward appearances of unity, not all was as it seemed. A dark secret, long buried beneath the surface of the Dominion, began to surface. During a particularly tense meeting with the ruling council, Alex overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. There were still those within the palace who were plotting against Lyra, seeking to take control and undo everything they had built. As the weeks passed, Alex and Lyra found themselves caught in a web of deception and betrayal that threatened not just their marriage, but the future of the Dominion itself. The whispers Alex had once ignored grew louder, and the threat of rebellion reared its ugly head once more. One evening, as they sat together, strategizing their next move, Lyra's voice broke the silence. "Alex, I need you to promise me something," she said, her gaze unwavering. "No matter what happens, promise me you'll protect the future of our people. Promise me you'll never let anyone tear us apart." Alex looked at her, the weight of her words sinking deep into his heart. "I swear to you, Lyra," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I will protect you, the Dominion, and everything we've fought for. No one will tear us apart." The bond between them, tested and forged through fire, had become unbreakable. As the shadows of conspiracy loomed closer, Alex and Lyra knew they would face whatever came next together, stronger than ever before. Their journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but they had proven time and again that their love and their dedication to their people could withstand anything. As the storm of political intrigue raged around them, they stood united, ready to fight for the future they both so desperately wanted to build. The political intrigue within the Dominion grew more intense as the weeks went on, but Alex and Lyra remained steadfast in their commitment to each other and their people. The threat of rebellion, though still a shadow in the distance, seemed to grow with every passing day, and the whispers of dissent within the palace echoed louder than ever. Despite their best efforts to hold the kingdom together, Alex knew that the true battle was just beginning. Lyra had always been the queen of her people, but now, she had become the queen of their hearts as well. As the pressure mounted, Alex found himself increasingly drawn to her strength, her resolve, and her unyielding dedication to the Dominion. They had faced so much together already, but it was clear that the road ahead would be even more treacherous. As they prepared for another round of negotiations with the outer territories, Lyra pulled Alex aside in the quiet of their chambers, her expression serious. "Alex, there is something I need to tell you," she began, her voice tinged with a hint of worry. Alex looked at her, concern filling his chest. "What is it, Lyra?" She took a deep breath, her gaze never leaving his. "There are factions within the palace that are plotting against us. They want to weaken our rule, and they will stop at nothing to see us fail." Alex's heart skipped a beat, but he remained calm. "How do you know this?" "I overheard a conversation," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "They're planning to make a move during the negotiations. We have to act quickly." Alex's mind raced as he processed the gravity of the situation. This was no longer just about securing peace or political stability. It was about their survival, both personally and as rulers. "We'll be ready," Alex said, his voice resolute. "We've faced challenges before, and we'll face them again. Together." Lyra gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Alex. Your strength is what keeps me going." As the days passed, Alex and Lyra worked in secret, gathering information and making preparations for the upcoming negotiations. Their allies in the outer territories were unaware of the threat looming over them, and it was up to Alex and Lyra to ensure that the talks went smoothly without falling prey to the schemes of their enemies. On the day of the negotiations, the atmosphere in the palace was tense, and every glance felt like a potential betrayal. As Alex and Lyra walked into the council chamber, surrounded by the most powerful leaders in the Dominion, the weight of the moment was not lost on either of them. They were no longer just participants in the political landscape. They were the ones shaping it, with everything on the line. The negotiations began as expected, with each leader presenting their demands and concerns. But as the discussions continued, Alex noticed subtle signs that something was amiss. One of the leaders, a known rival of Lyra's, seemed to be pushing for more extreme measures, while another appeared overly eager to secure an alliance. With a faction known for its questionable practices, Alex kept his eyes on Lyra, and she caught his gaze for a brief moment. Without a word, she gave him a slight nod, signaling that she was aware of the danger. As the meeting reached its climax, it became clear that the conspirators were preparing to make their move. One of the leaders stood and made a sudden, unexpected declaration, accusing Lyra of failing to protect the Dominion and demanding her immediate resignation. The room fell silent, and for a moment, Alex thought the world had stopped spinning. But Lyra's calm demeanor never wavered. She stood tall, her eyes burning with quiet fury. "You would betray me now, in front of the leaders of our kingdom?" she asked, her voice cold but filled with authority. "I've fought for this Dominion, and I will continue to fight for it, no matter the cost." The leader faltered, but only for a moment, before the others in the room began to murmur their discontent. The tension was palpable, but Alex knew this was the moment that would define their future. He stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "If you think you can tear this kingdom apart, you are gravely mistaken," he said, his voice steady and strong. "Lyra is not alone in this fight. We are in this together, and we will not let you undermine everything we've built." The room went silent again, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Slowly, one by one, the leaders began to speak in support of Lyra, rallying behind her against the coup that had been plotted. The conspirators, realizing their plan was failing, began to retreat, their attempts to overthrow Lyra's rule unraveling before their eyes. As the meeting adjourned, the tension in the room finally began to dissipate. Alex and Lyra stood together, victorious once again. But as they walked out of the council chamber, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was still ahead. The threat of betrayal, the struggle for power, and the weight of their responsibilities had only just begun. And yet, despite the challenges, Alex knew one thing for certain: they would face it all together. With Lyra by his side, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. In the days that followed their victory in the council, Alex and Lyra found themselves facing a new kind of challenge. The rebellion had been thwarted, but the political landscape of the Dominion was more volatile than ever. Lyra's enemies, though momentarily defeated, were not ones to accept defeat easily. The rumors of dissent within the palace had not vanished, and a quiet tension still lingered in the air. But despite the dangers that loomed, Alex and Lyra stood strong. Their bond, forged through countless trials, had become their greatest weapon. As they continued their work to rebuild the Dominion and restore peace, Alex could sense that something was shifting within Lyra. She was no longer the distant queen he had first met, but a woman who had embraced both the weight of her crown and the love they shared. One evening, after another long day of meetings, Alex and Lyra stood together in the palace gardens, watching as the twin moons rose high in the sky. Lyra had always loved the view from the gardens, and Alex had come to understand why. There was something calming about the night sky, something that reminded them both of the world they were trying to protect. "Do you ever wonder, Alex, if we'll ever find peace?" Lyra asked, her voice soft, almost wistful. Alex turned to her, sensing the weight of her words. "I think we've found peace already," he said, his voice steady. "Maybe not in the world around us, but in each other." Lyra looked at him, a small, appreciative smile tugging at her lips. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she admitted, her gaze softening. "When we first met, I thought I was alone in this fight. I didn't think I would ever find someone who understood the weight of the crown like you do." Alex's heart swelled at her words. He had come to realize that, in many ways, they were more than just partners in ruling the Dominion. They were two people who had learned to trust each other, to lean on each other, and to fight for something greater than themselves. "You're not alone, Lyra," Alex said softly. "Not now, not ever." As the days passed, the Dominion began to stabilize. The political infighting that had once threatened to tear the kingdom apart began to subside, and the people of the outer territories slowly began to trust Lyra's leadership. Alex and Lyra's partnership had become a symbol of unity, not just for the Dominion, but for the entire galaxy. But even as peace seemed within reach, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to come. The forces that had once conspired against them were not gone. They were merely regrouping. And the truth was, Alex was prepared for whatever came next. He had been through wars, betrayal, and loss before. But this time, he had something to fight for, something worth protecting: Lyra and the future they had started to build together. One afternoon, as they walked through the palace halls discussing their plans for the future, they were interrupted by a sudden, urgent message. The outer colonies were once again in turmoil, and the threat of rebellion had returned. This time, however, it wasn't just the outer territories that were in danger. The rebellion had spread to the very heart of the Dominion, and it seemed that their enemies had learned from their previous mistakes. Lyra turned to Alex, her eyes hardening with resolve. "This is it," she said, her voice unwavering. "We fought too hard to let it all slip away now." Alex nodded, his expression matching hers. "We'll do whatever it takes to protect this kingdom," he said. Together, as they prepared for the final battle to secure the future of the Dominion, Alex and Lyra knew that this would be their greatest challenge yet. The stakes were higher than ever before, but they also knew that their love and their shared determination were the keys to victory. They had already faced the darkness of their world, and they had come out stronger. Now, they would face the ultimate test. With their combined strength, they would not only protect their people, but ensure that the legacy they had fought so hard to build would stand for generations to come. The journey had been long, but the end was in sight. As the first ships of the rebellion's fleet approached the palace, Alex and Lyra stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. They were no longer just rulers, but a force to be reckoned with, bound together by a love that had been tested and proven. And as the battle for the future of the Dominion began, Alex knew that with Lyra by his side, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The battle for the future of the Dominion had begun, and Alex and Lyra were at the heart of it. The rebellion that had once seemed like a distant threat was now at their doorstep, and the stakes could not have been higher. With the outer colonies once again in turmoil and traitors within the palace seeking to overthrow them, the time for diplomacy had passed. Alex stood by Lyra's side, both of them resolute in their determination to protect the future of their people. But this would be their greatest challenge yet. As the first wave of rebel forces approached the palace, the tension in the air was almost suffocating. The palace, once a symbol of power and stability, now seemed like a fortress on the edge of collapse. The walls that had once echoed with the sounds of laughter and celebration were now filled with the sound of marching feet and the distant rumble of war. Alex knew that the time for words had ended. They were no longer just rulers. They were warriors, and they had to fight to preserve everything they had built. Lyra, despite the weight of her responsibilities and the overwhelming odds, stood tall beside him. Her calm resolve was a beacon for everyone around her, but Alex could see the weariness in her eyes. She had been through so much already, and the burden of leadership was more than anyone could bear alone. But they had made a promise to each other, to face whatever came next, together. The War Council had convened earlier that morning, and the plans for defense were set in motion. Every soldier in the Dominion was called to action, and Alex and Lyra's forces were ready to make their stand. The enemy would be upon them within hours, but they had one advantage: unity. The Dominion may have been fractured in the past, but now, with Alex and Lyra's unwavering leadership, they stood as one. As the palace walls began to shake with the impact of the enemy's first barrage, Alex turned to Lyra, his hand on her shoulder. "We've got this," he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced with the realization that this would be a battle like no other. Lyra gave him a small but determined smile. "We always have," she replied. "Now, we fight for everything." The sound of the first battle horn echoed through the palace, signaling the beginning of the final confrontation. Alex and Lyra took their positions at the front of their forces, leading with the courage that had become their trademark. As they charged into the fray, the battlefield was chaos. The sky was filled with the roar of ships, and the ground shook with the heavy footfalls of soldiers clashing in brutal combat. But even in the midst of the destruction, Alex and Lyra were a symbol of hope, their bond a reminder to their people that they were not alone. The fight was long and hard, but Alex could feel the tide turning in their favor. Every victory on the battlefield, every inch gained, was a testament to the strength of their alliance. As the day wore on, The rebel forces began to retreat, their morale shattered by the unity and determination of Lyra's forces. But just as victory seemed within reach, a new threat emerged. A faction of traitors from within the palace, those who had once been close allies of Lyra, made their move. They attempted to seize control of the palace itself, launching a final, desperate assault to capture the throne. Lyra, though exhausted, was resolute. She would not allow her kingdom to fall, not to the enemies outside nor to those who had betrayed her from within. "We finish this now," she said to Alex, her voice cold but filled with the strength of a queen who would not be defeated. Alex nodded, his heart heavy with the realization that the battle was far from over. The two of them, together, stormed the heart of the palace, where the traitors had taken their stand. It was a fierce confrontation, but Lyra and Alex fought with everything they had. As they confronted the leader of the betrayal, Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. These were not just enemies. These were people who had once believed in the same cause, who had once stood with them in their mission to secure the Dominion's future. But now, they were the greatest threat to everything Alex and Lyra had fought for. The final battle was swift and decisive. With a powerful strike, Alex and Lyra defeated the traitors and regained control of the palace. But even as the dust settled, Alex knew that the true victory lay not in the battles won, but in the strength they had found in each other. The Dominion had been saved, but more importantly, their bond had been solidified. As they stood together in the aftermath of the battle, looking out over the kingdom they had protected, Lyra turned to Alex, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We did it," she said, her voice soft. "Together." Alex smiled, his heart full. "Yes, we did, and nothing will tear us apart." With their enemies vanquished and the Dominion's future secured, Alex and Lyra knew that their journey was far from over. But they had proven that no matter the odds, they could face anything together. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that the strength of their love and their commitment to their people would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The final battle had come to an end, and the Dominion was safe once again. The forces that had threatened to tear the kingdom apart were vanquished, and peace, though fragile, was restored. But for Alex and Lyra, the battle was not just one of weapons or armies. It was the battle for their future, for the future of their people, and for the bond they had forged through fire. As they stood together, surveying the aftermath of the conflict, Alex couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. From a forced marriage to a true partnership, from a kingdom on the brink of collapse to one on the road to recovery, they had fought every step of the way, side by side. The scars of the battle were visible in the wreckage around them, but so too were the signs of hope. The Dominion had withstood the storm, and now, it was time to rebuild. "We did it," Lyra said, her voice filled with a quiet, almost disbelieving joy. "We saved the kingdom." Alex turned to her, his gaze filled with pride. "Together," he replied, his voice steady. "We saved it together." Their journey had not been easy, and there were still many challenges ahead. The road to true peace would take time, and the scars of war would not fade overnight. But as they looked at each other, Alex knew that they had something stronger than any army, any weapon, or any political faction. They had each other. As the days passed, Lyra and Alex worked tirelessly to restore the Dominion, focusing not just on rebuilding the infrastructure of the kingdom, but on mending the hearts of its people. Their leadership was a symbol of resilience, and slowly but surely, the trust of the people was regained. Alex found himself more and more involved in the everyday workings of the Dominion, not just as a husband or a consort, but as a true partner in every sense of the word. Together, they tackled the lingering issues of corruption, rebuilding relationships with the outer colonies, and restoring stability to the fractured political system. One evening, as they stood in the palace gardens, watching the twin moons rise high above the horizon, Lyra turned to Alex, her expression thoughtful. "I never imagined this would be my life," she said, her voice soft, almost wistful. "That I would find love in the most unexpected of places." Alex smiled, his heart swelling with affection. "Life has a way of surprising us," he said, his tone light, but filled with sincerity. "And sometimes, the most unexpected things turn out to be the best." They stood in silence for a moment, taking in the beauty of the night. For the first time since their journey began, there was peace in their hearts. They had faced unimaginable challenges, but they had done it together, and now they could finally look toward the future with hope. Lyra turned to Alex, her eyes meeting his with a quiet determination. "We've made it this far," she said, her voice firm. "And I know we can continue to lead the Dominion into a brighter future. Together." Alex nodded, his hand finding hers. "Whatever comes next, Lyra, we face it together," he said, his voice filled with unwavering conviction. The years ahead would not be without their struggles, but Alex and Lyra had proven that with love, trust, and a shared commitment to their people, they could overcome anything. And so, as the kingdom slowly healed and the light of peace began to shine once more, they knew that the true legacy they had built was not one of power or conquest, but of unity, love, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. As they walked forward, hand in hand, into the unknown future, they were no longer just rulers of the Dominion. They were a symbol of hope, of resilience, and of the unbreakable bond that had been forged through their trials. Together, they would face whatever came next, and together, they would build a future brighter than any they had ever imagined.